Something really unusual is happening to Earth right now. I'm not talking about the weather, I'm talking about the actual mechanics of the planet. Deep beneath all the molten magma, researchers are finding that the very center of the Earth's core seems to have paused its spin. Up in the sky, they're tracking a massive weak spot growing in our magnetic field over the Atlantic. That field is basically the only shield keeping solar storms from messing with the internet and our power grids. Out in the ocean, the giant currents that help balance the global climate look like they're hitting the brakes. If they actually stall out, it could severely disrupt human agriculture and where we can safely live. And it gets weirder. The protective bubble our sun puts around the solar system appears to be shrinking. High-energy radiation from deep space might be slipping through, hitting our atmosphere, and potentially changing how clouds even form. Any one of these things is a massive deal, but scientists are watching them all happen at the exact same time. This isn't just a string of bad luck. When the core, the magnetic shield, and the oceans all start stuttering together, you aren't looking at a coincidence. You are looking at a machine that is preparing for a hard reset, and we are stuck inside it. But the scariest part? The trigger isn't even coming from inside the planet. To understand how completely exposed we are right now, you have to forget everything you know about the empty night sky. Because the storm didn't start down here. We are flying straight into it. For decades, astronomers believed that the interstellar medium was relatively sparse and benign. We assumed we were cruising through a quiet neighborhood. But in 2012, NASA's Voyager 1 probe did something no human-made object had ever done. It crossed the heliopause, the absolute boundary of our solar system, and entered interstellar space. 6 years later, Voyager 2 followed. The data these twin probes sent back from the dark completely shattered our comforting models. They did not find a quiet, empty vacuum. They detected a sudden, massive spike in plasma density. The material outside our solar system is significantly denser and more highly magnetized than we ever predicted. We are not cruising through a vacuum. We are plowing directly into the Local Interstellar Cloud, a massive, turbulent structure of high-energy plasma. The anomalies you are seeing on Earth, the erratic weather, the atmospheric shifts, are not just the result of human industry. You are looking at the friction of a planet hitting a cosmic wall. We are entering a new, hostile environment, and the outside pressure is rising. But surely the Earth is protected. We look up at the sun and we see a source of heat and light. A giant, reliable light bulb. As long as it stays stable, we stay stable. That is the assumption. Here is why it is wrong. Generating light is only the secondary function of our star. Its primary job, the only reason life on Earth is mathematically possible, is to act as a physical shield. The sun constantly blows a hurricane of charged particles outward in all directions, creating a massive magnetic bubble called the Heliosphere. Think of it as the windshield of a ship driving through a severe blizzard. The heliosphere deflects the dangerous galactic radiation, the cosmic rays, and the interstellar dust, forcing them to flow around our solar system. Without this bubble, the atmosphere of Earth would have been stripped away and rendered barren billions of years ago. We owe our existence to the integrity of this shield, but the windshield is cracking. In 2008, NASA launched the Interstellar Boundary Explorer, or IBEX satellite. Its mission was to map the invisible edge of the heliosphere. The data it has collected over the last decade is alarming. The heliosphere is not a perfect, stable sphere. It is deforming. It is asymmetric, and, more importantly, it is yielding to the pressure from the outside. As we move deeper into the dense interstellar cloud, the external plasma is squeezing our protective bubble. At the same time, the solar wind that inflates this bubble is going through erratic cycles of weakening. The outward pressure is dropping just as the inward pressure is spiking. Imagine driving a car into a hurricane while your windshield slowly thins to the width of a sheet of paper. The implication is obvious. The shield is failing. The barrier that separates the fragile biology of Earth from the high-energy physics of the Milky Way is shrinking. And when the windshield cracks, the storm does not stay outside. It comes inside. What happens when the storm comes inside? In 2011, physicists at the CERN laboratory in Switzerland ran an extraordinary experiment. They built an artificial atmosphere inside a particle accelerator, fired a beam of cosmic radiation into it, and watched. Clouds materialized out of thin air. That single result changed everything we thought we knew about the weather. Here is why. Cloud formation is not the simple process we learned about in school. Water evaporates, rises, cools, condenses. It is actually a high-energy physics event. It requires a trigger. Water vapor needs microscopic particles, condensation nuclei to cling to before it can form a cloud. For years, the origin of these particles was a mystery. Then, the physicist Henrik Svensmark proposed a radical mechanism. He argued that the clouds in our sky are physically created by galactic cosmic rays, subatomic particles fired from the remnants of dead stars, traveling across the galaxy at nearly the speed of light. When these high-energy particles punch through our atmosphere, they forcibly strip electrons from air molecules, ionizing them and instantly creating the exact nuclei required for water to condense. That was the cloud experiment at CERN, and Svensmark was vindicated. The math is absolute. Cosmic rays create clouds. Think about that for a moment. The clouds above your head right now, the ones blocking the sun or letting the rain fall, may have been triggered by a star that exploded 10 million years ago on the other side of the galaxy. You are living under the weather of dead stars. That is extraordinary, regardless of what it means for the climate. But now, connect the variables. The heliosphere is shrinking. Our solar shield is weakening. Because the shield is down, an unprecedented volume of galactic cosmic rays is currently penetrating the Earth's atmosphere. The extreme weather, the unprecedented floods, the chaotic cloud cover. It is not just your carbon footprint. It is the radiation of dead stars rewriting the thermodynamics of our sky. The thermostat of our planet is being hijacked by the galaxy. So here is the question that should keep you up at night. If the outside barrier is breached, what is actually standing between you and the full force of the cosmos? What is the difference between a sunburn and a bullet? This is not a riddle. It is the single most important distinction in atmospheric physics, and almost nobody understands it. We trust the atmosphere. We have been taught since childhood that the ozone layer is our miraculous biological hazmat suit, the invisible shield that protects us from the ultraviolet rays of the sun, and therefore, we assume, it must also protect us from whatever the deeper universe throws our way. The sky is a thick, impenetrable blanket. But here is the answer. A sunburn is caused by electromagnetic radiation, gentle waves of energy that the ozone layer can absorb. That is the sunburn. Now here is the bullet. Galactic cosmic rays are not light. They are not waves. They are physical objects. Heavy, high-speed atomic nuclei, mostly protons and alpha particles, ejected by the violent explosions of supernovas millions of years ago, traveling across the vacuum of space at nearly the speed of light. When a particle moving that fast encounters our atmosphere, it does not bounce off. It does not get absorbed by a thin layer of ozone. It hits like a microscopic high-speed projectile. The ozone layer stops sunburns. It does not stop bullets. When one of these deep space projectiles smashes into a nitrogen or oxygen molecule in the upper stratosphere, it triggers a dramatic microscopic event known as cosmic spallation. The impact is so intensely energetic that it literally shatters the target atom into pieces, forcing it to eject neutrons and protons, completely rewriting its atomic structure. This collision creates a cascade of secondary particles that shower down toward the surface. But more importantly, it leaves behind physical wreckage, rare radioactive isotopes, specifically carbon-14 and beryllium-10. These isotopes do not belong in the normal chemistry of our air. They are the debris of a cosmic bombardment. Over months and years, they drift down from the upper atmosphere and fall like invisible snow onto the polar ice caps of Greenland and Antarctica, becoming permanently trapped in the ice, freezing the evidence of the bombardment in perfect chronological order. By drilling thousands of feet into the glaciers, scientists extract ice cores that act as a barcode of cosmic history. The ice does not lie. It does not care about political debates, and when geologists analyze these cores, they see a striking correlation. Throughout the deep history of our planet, massive spikes in beryllium-10 perfectly align with periods of radical, chaotic shifts in the Earth's climate and severe evolutionary bottlenecks. The radiation leaves a permanent physical scar on the planet, and right now, the isotope levels are fluctuating sharply again. The bombardment has already begun. The radiation is passing straight through our atmospheric shield, stripping electrons, ionizing the air, and altering the fundamental thermodynamics of the sky. We are leaking into space, and space is leaking into us. So let us take stock. 3 barriers examined. The outer shield is compressing. The cosmic radiation is punching through the stratosphere. And the ozone, the layer we trusted since childhood, was never designed for this kind of threat. 3 barriers failing. But maybe you are thinking, fine, we have lost the outer defenses. Surely the Earth itself has a backup. It does. The magnetosphere, our secondary, fail-safe shield. A solid, reliable iron fortress that has stood for billions of years, deflecting whatever manages to slip past the sun. The ground beneath your feet is a permanent sanctuary. Except for one critical problem. The universe does not care about your sense of security. It is governed strictly by the cold laws of probability and thermodynamics. And at the exact same moment in geological time that our outer cosmic barrier is failing, our inner planetary barrier is collapsing. The data comes from the European Space Agency's Swarm satellites. Launched in 2013, this constellation of probes was designed to measure the magnetic signals stemming from Earth's core, mantle, and crust. The models predicted a slow, stable, predictable decline in magnetic strength over millennia. Instead, the satellites recorded a freefall. The magnetic field is weakening at an accelerating rate, almost 10 times faster than it initially calculated. But it is not just fading evenly, it is tearing open. Over South America and the southern Atlantic Ocean, a massive, expanding depression has formed, known as the South Atlantic Anomaly. This is not a minor fluctuation. It is a gaping wound in our electromagnetic architecture, where the magnetic field has dropped by over 1/3 of its normal strength. It has grown so large and so weak that satellites passing through this region frequently experience catastrophic hardware failures. The cosmic radiation is no longer being deflected. It is pouring straight down into the upper atmosphere. The anomaly is currently splitting into 2 separate lobes, indicating that the internal dynamo of the Earth is fundamentally breaking down. Imagine the geometry of this trap. You are a sailor in a submarine, thousands of feet deep in a hostile, crushing ocean. First, you hear the outer titanium hull begin to groan and buckle under a sudden, massive increase in external pressure. That is the heliosphere compressing. You tell yourself not to panic, because the inner pressure hull is thick and perfectly engineered. But then, you hear the steel of the inner hull begin to scream, warp, and tear open. That is the Earth's magnetic field collapsing. A double shield failure. The barrier separating you from the hostile void is vanishing from both the outside and the inside simultaneously. The exact mechanism of why the Earth's core is stalling is something we will examine in sobering detail later. But right now, the mathematical convergence of these events is undeniable. You are standing naked in a cosmic blizzard, and the roof of your house has just blown off. And we possess absolutely no technological defense capable of replacing a planetary magnetosphere. At this point, you might actually feel a strange kind of relief. The shields are weakening, but we are still here. The magnetic field has been declining for centuries, and civilization keeps chugging along. We survived ice ages, we survived plagues, we survived 2 world wars, Surely we can handle a weaker magnetic field. Humans adapt. That is what we do. Hold that thought. Because the next piece of data is going to take that comfort away from you. If the math is so clear, and the physical degradation of our planetary shields is so measurable, why is no one talking about the galaxy? Why do we turn on the evening news and only hear endless debates about carbon taxes, plastic recycling, and political treaties? Why do we insist on viewing every bizarre storm, every unprecedented flood, and every shattered temperature record as a purely local, human-made event? The answer lies in a fatal psychological glitch hardwired into the human brain, combined with a staggering level of anthropocentrism. In disaster psychology, there is a concept known as normalcy bias, a cognitive coping mechanism that causes people to underestimate both the likelihood of a disaster and its potential effects. Our brains are evolutionarily programmed to assume that tomorrow will basically look like yesterday. When faced with an existential threat on a macro scale, a scale involving stars, interstellar plasma, and planetary cores, the mind simply refuses to process the data. It shrinks the problem down to a size it can comprehend. But there is a darker reason for our blindness. We desperately want the anomalies to be our fault. We want to be the villains of this story. Why? Because if we are the ones breaking the climate with our factories and our cars, it implies that we have the power to fix it. It implies control. It is a comforting illusion of agency. To admit that the Earth is being subjected to immense external thermodynamic stress from the galaxy is to admit that we are powerless. We are like a colony of ants standing on the deck of a sinking battleship, arguing fiercely about which ant dropped a crumb on the floor, blaming each other for the mess, while completely ignoring the cosmic force that just tore a hole through the hull. Yes, human industry affects the chemical composition of the atmosphere. But compared to the fusion engine of the Sun and the charged particle bombardment of the Local Interstellar Cloud, our localized emissions are a mathematical footnote. The galaxy is actively rewriting the physical parameters of our solar system. This is not a reason to despair. Not yet. This is a reason to see clearly. The first step in any survival situation is to stop lying to yourself about where you are. And the Earth is not just a passive, dead rock waiting to be destroyed. You cannot apply immense stress to a highly complex thermodynamic system and expect it to remain static. The Earth is a closed, cybernetic system with intricate, interlocking feedback loops designed to regulate its temperature and chemistry. When pushed to the brink by an external force, whether cosmic radiation or a failing magnetic core, it does not simply sit there and absorb the damage. It reacts. It attempts to re-establish mathematical equilibrium at any cost. And when a planet fights back, the rules of biology change overnight. The unsettling reality is that the planet is not trying to save us. To the Earth's regulatory system, we are not the patient. We are simply part of the excess entropy that needs to be reduced. There is a story we tell ourselves about nature. We see a forest, a drying river, or a bleaching coral reef, and we feel pity. Decades of environmental campaigns have conditioned us to view the Earth as a fragile, passive victim of human greed. A delicate painting that we are carelessly smudging with our industrial dirty hands. The planet needs to be saved by us through recycling programs and carbon credits. But physics and systems engineering tell a completely different story. The Earth is not a passive victim. It is a highly advanced, automated control system. In the 1970s, scientist James Lovelock proposed the Gaia hypothesis, supported by a mathematical model known as Daisy World. He demonstrated that the biosphere, the sum of all living things, interacts with the inorganic surroundings to form a synergistic, self-regulating complex system. The planet mathematically maintains the conditions for life through negative feedback loops. If the sun gets too hot, the biosphere produces more white clouds to reflect the heat, acting as a planetary thermostat. But control theory dictates that if a system is subjected to an overwhelming external stress, like the sudden influx of cosmic radiation and the collapse of the magnetic field. The negative feedback loops eventually fail. The thermostat breaks. And when the thermostat breaks, the system flips into positive feedback. A positive feedback loop does not stabilize, it amplifies. Imagine standing on a stage and holding a microphone too close to a speaker. A tiny sound enters the mic, gets amplified by the speaker, enters the mic again louder, and instantly builds into a deafening, system-destroying screech. That is exactly what is happening to the Earth right now. The planet is not dying passively. It has actively triggered a massive, systemic amplification of heat to force the environment into a new state of thermodynamic equilibrium. When a human body detects a foreign threat, it does not negotiate. It restricts blood flow, alters its chemistry, and artificially raises its core temperature to eliminate the pathogen. It induces a fever. The Earth is currently inducing a cybernetic fever. The catastrophic weather, the ocean anomalies, the heat domes, these are not the symptoms of a dying planet. They are the tools of a planet that is fighting back. We are not the disease, but we are caught in the fever. And the fever is designed to burn away the excess entropy. Let me frame where we are. The galaxy is pushing inward. The Earth's shields are failing from both sides. And now the planet's own immune system has flipped from stabilizing to amplifying. We are caught between an external assault from the cosmos and an internal fever from the Earth itself. But it is about to get much worse, because the planet just opened its carbon vault. There is a belief that we can still stop this. That climate change is a simple, linear equation. Factories emit greenhouse gases, temperature goes up. Pass the right laws, build enough electric cars, stop burning fossil fuels, and the temperature stops rising. The steering wheel is still in our hands. But this belief ignores the harsh reality of non-linear dynamics. The Earth has its own reserves of carbon, buried deep underground and frozen in the dark. And the planet has just decided to open the vault. In the fall of 2020, a Russian research vessel, the Academic Keldysh, sailed into the Laptov Sea in the Arctic Ocean. What the scientists on board found changed everything. They did not find a slowly warming sea. They found megaseeps, massive fountains of methane boiling up from the seafloor across thousands of square miles. Geophysicists call it the Clathrate Gun hypothesis. For millions of years, unimaginable quantities of methane, a greenhouse gas roughly 80 times more potent than carbon dioxide in the short term, have been trapped in the permafrost and locked in icy structures called methane clathrates on the ocean floor. Essentially ice that burns. As long as the water stays cold and the pressure remains high, the trap stays sealed and the lock holds. But the cosmic and internal thermal stress applied to our planet has broken the seal. The frozen clathrates are destabilizing. Simultaneously, the Arctic permafrost is collapsing. According to the Arctic Monitoring and Assessment Program data from 2021, the Arctic is heating up 4 times faster than the rest of the globe. Vast craters, like the Batagayka megaslump in Siberia, are tearing open the Earth. Melting permafrost is not just ice turning into mud. It is ancient frozen biological matter, the remains of plants and animals from the Pleistocene epoch, suddenly thawing and rotting. We are thawing the ancient past. As this organic matter decays, it releases gigatons of methane and carbon directly into the atmosphere, completely bypassing human industry. The Earth is now out-emitting us. Even if we shut down every factory, grounded every airplane, and turned off every engine tonight, the temperature would continue to surge. The positive feedback loop is running on autonomous power. Once an avalanche starts, you cannot ask the snow to climb back up the mountain. The trajectory is set. Here is where the optimists make their last stand. Carbon dioxide is actually plant food, they argue. A warmer, carbon-rich Earth will just be a greener, more lush tropical paradise. And honestly, That sounds reasonable for a moment. Longer growing seasons, more vegetation. A warm, tropical Earth where life flourishes. Maybe this is not a catastrophe. Maybe it is just a transition to a different kind of abundance. 56 million years ago, the Earth ran exactly this experiment. Here is what actually happened. During an event known as the Paleocene-Eocene Thermal Maximum, or PETM, a massive, sudden release of carbon, likely triggered by intense volcanic activity and melting methane clathrates, pushed the global temperature up by 8 degrees Celsius. We know exactly what occurred, because the evidence is written in the isotopic ratio of carbon-13 found in deep-sea sediment cores. The Earth did not become a lush, green utopia for complex life. It became an acid bath. When the oceans absorb massive quantities of excess CO2, the chemical reaction produces carbonic acid. This process, known as ocean acidification, alters the pH level of the water to the point where calcium carbonate literally dissolves. Why does that matter? Because the entire base of the marine food web, plankton, benthic foraminifera, coral reefs, relies on calcium carbonate to build their shells and skeletons. During the PETM, the bottom of the food chain simply dissolved into the acid, triggering a cascading mass extinction that starved the predators above them. The carrying capacity of the planet, the mathematical limit of how much biological mass a system can support, collapsed. Yes, life survived the PETM. Life always finds a way. But what kind of life? The Earth reset its biological ledger. It wiped out the complex, energy-hungry organisms and handed the oceans over to anaerobic bacteria, toxic algae blooms, and jellyfish. The rules of biology are fundamentally changing around us right now. The planet is executing a built-in reset protocol, scrubbing its own operating system to lower the thermodynamic load. We are a highly complex, energy-intensive mammalian species living at the very top of a food chain that is currently dissolving in acid. But to understand the true source of this thermal overload, we need to stop looking at the sky and the sea. We need to look straight down. Because the real engine of this crisis is not above us. It is buried 4,000 miles beneath our feet, and it has just broken down. Stamp your foot on the ground. Feel the concrete, the dirt, the bedrock beneath you. It feels absolute, permanent. We are conditioned to think of the Earth as a solid, homogeneous sphere of rock, spinning predictably through the void like a billiard ball. The ground is the one thing that will never change. But the Earth is not a solid rock. It is a highly volatile, layered machine. Pause and appreciate the engineering for a moment. You are standing on a paper-thin crust, floating on an ocean of boiling magma, which surrounds a churning liquid iron outer core, which in turn encases a solid, super-dense iron inner core roughly the size of Pluto. This machine has been running non-stop for 4.5 billion years. The fact that it works at all is the real miracle, but for the planetary machine to continue functioning, for the magnetic shield to remain active, this inner core must spin independently, slightly faster than the rest of the planet. It is the central rotor of our global dynamo, and the rotor is failing. The deepest engine of the Earth has mathematically stalled. In early 2023, a groundbreaking study from Peking University sent shockwaves through the geophysical community. Seismologists Yi Yang and Xiaodong Song analyzed decades of seismic waves generated by repeating earthquakes. Shockwaves that pass directly through the center of the Earth. By measuring the microscopic differences in how long these waves took to travel through the core over the last 60 years, they discovered a profound structural shift. The inner core is no longer spinning faster than the mantle. Around the year 2009, it hit a critical deceleration point and essentially paused. Now, relative to the surface we live on, the inner core is rotating in reverse. It is lagging behind. Imagine you are driving a massive, heavy truck down the highway at high speed. Suddenly, the steel flywheel inside the transmission disconnects and grinds to a halt. The truck does not stop instantly, but the internal momentum abruptly shifts. The entire chassis shudders, the gears grind, and the dashboard lights begin to flash red. You are sitting in the cabin of that truck right now. The inner core is the dense flywheel of our planet. Its desynchronization is not just geological trivia. It is a profound mechanical failure at the very heart of the Earth's operating system. We are living on the outer shell of a machine that is tearing itself apart from the inside out. And because the Earth is a closed physical system, the energy from that internal failure does not just disappear. It transfers outward, straight up toward the surface, connecting seemingly random global catastrophes into one unified, inescapable equation. But what does a stalling core 4,000 miles down have to do with the weather above your head? At first glance, nothing. The news reports anomalous earthquakes, sudden shifts in ocean currents, and extreme weather as separate, tragic coincidences. But this assumption violates the most fundamental law of rotational physics, the conservation of angular momentum. When a figure skater pulls her arms in, she spins faster. Throws her arms out, she slows down. The momentum has to go somewhere. The Earth is a giant spinning skater. The inner core, the liquid outer core, the rocky mantle, and the thin crust are all mechanically coupled by gravity and electromagnetic friction. When the massive iron core decelerates and stalls, the mathematical balance of the planet is shattered. The lost angular momentum from the core is forcefully transferred to the mantle and the crust. We can actually measure this in real time. NASA's LAGEOS satellites, which use highly precise lasers to track the exact shape and rotation of the planet, have recorded microscopic, erratic fluctuations in the length of day. The Earth is physically staggering, its rotation is wobbling, and the days are literally shortening and lengthening in unpredictable microsecond increments. This transfer of momentum is the invisible ghost in the machine. When the mantle absorbs this kinetic shock, the tectonic plates grind against each other with altered stress patterns, triggering anomalous, seismic and volcanic activity. Deep sea vents and mantle plumes inject massive, unaccounted thermal spikes directly into the bottom of the ocean. This explains why the oceans are boiling, why the atmospheric models are breaking down, and why the planetary thermostat has failed. It is not just greenhouse gases. The entire mechanical framework of the Earth is shuddering. We previously discussed the accelerating collapse of the magnetic field and the gaping hole of the South Atlantic anomaly. Now you understand why. The geodynamo, the turbulent swirling of liquid iron that generates our magnetic shield, requires the stable differential rotation of the inner core to function. With the core stalled, the dynamo is suffocating. The magnetic field is not just fading, it is structurally imploding. And history tells us exactly what happens when the dynamo flatlines. There is a comfort we cling to: deep geological time. Even if the magnetic field is collapsing, even if the poles are preparing to flip, surely it is a process that takes tens of thousands of years. A slow, gradual fading that humanity can easily adapt to over hundreds of generations. Our electronics, our power grids, our DNA, safe for the foreseeable future. But the Earth's geological record has no obligation to respect our timeline. The math of previous magnetic inversions proves that the transition is not always a slow, graceful fade. It can be a brutal, sudden drop off a cliff. Consider the Laschamp event. 42,000 years ago, during the late Pleistocene, the Earth's geodynamo went into a state of acute shutdown. The magnetic poles attempted to swap places. To understand the speed and ferocity of this event, scientists turned to the ancient kauri trees preserved in the peat bogs of New Zealand. In 2021, an international team led by Alan Cooper analysed the rings of these massive trees, measuring the precise levels of radiocarbon trapped in the wood. The results were staggering. The magnetic field did not just weaken slowly, it crashed to between 0 and 6% of its normal strength. And it stayed there for centuries. With the magnetic shield virtually gone, the Earth was entirely exposed to the raw physics of the cosmos. Solar storms and galactic cosmic rays stripped away the ozone layer. The sky literally changed color, glowing with terrifying global auroras as radiation slammed directly into the lower atmosphere. The subsequent bombardment forced early humans into caves, spiked global mutation rates, and contributed to the extinction of Neanderthals and megafauna. Now take that paleoclimatic precedent and apply it to the 21st century. The magnetic field is currently dropping 10 times faster than previously modeled. The South Atlantic anomaly is growing precisely as it did leading up to the Lachamp event. But 42,000 years ago, humanity did not have an artificial, electrified infrastructure. Today, our entire civilization, from the GPS satellites guiding global logistics, to the internet routing our finances, to the transformers pumping water into our cities, relies absolutely on the assumption that the sky is magnetically shielded. If the dynamo crashes to zero tomorrow, we do not need a catastrophic conflict to end modern human history. The next moderate solar flare will induce geomagnetic currents so powerful they will melt the global power grid in a matter of hours. The transformers will burn, the supply chains will halt, the digital world will simply evaporate, leaving 8 billion people stranded in the dark, under an unshielded sky. The core is stalling, the shield is falling, and the excess energy has to go somewhere. It is rising up, it is boiling the oceans and swelling the sky. Let me zoom out so you can see the full picture so far. Cosmic radiation is rising. The magnetic field is collapsing 10 times faster than predicted. The last time this happened, 42,000 years ago, Neanderthals went extinct and the sky turned to fire. But back then, there were no power grids to melt. There were no 8 billion people depending on satellites and supply chains. We are running the same experiment with infinitely higher stakes. And now, all of that energy has to go somewhere. So let us look at where it is going. Walk outside on a summer evening and feel the air cool down. Watch the sunset. There is an intuitive trust that the heat of the day is radiating safely back into the freezing void of space. The Earth inhales sunlight during the day and exhales infrared heat at night. Global warming just means the summers will be a few degrees hotter, and we will simply need to run our air conditioners a little longer. A mild inconvenience, but you cannot air condition your way out of a broken thermodynamic engine. The Earth has ceased to be an open, breathing system. It is mathematically transformed into a perfectly sealed, high-pressure thermos, and the heat is no longer escaping. In 2021, a joint study by NASA and NOAA analyzed data from the CERES satellite network, the clouds and the Earth's radiant energy system. These satellites meticulously measure the exact amount of solar energy entering the atmosphere and the exact amount of thermal infrared energy bouncing back out. The data they published did not just show a gradual warming, it showed a fundamental mechanical failure of the planetary exhaust system. Between 2005 and 2019, the Earth's energy imbalance, or EEI, completely doubled. The planet is currently absorbing roughly 240 terawatts more energy than it is emitting. 240 trillion watts of excess heat trapped inside the system, every single second of every single day. According to the first law of thermodynamics, energy cannot be destroyed. It cannot simply vanish. If 240 terawatts of energy enter a closed system and do not leave, that energy must be converted into physical chaos. It goes into melting the permafrost, speeding up the atmospheric molecules, and rapidly expanding the oceans. You are not experiencing bad weather. You are standing inside a sealed pressure cooker that has just had its exhaust valve welded shut, while the burner is turned on maximum. The heat is accumulating exponentially, building up kinetic energy in the atmosphere that will eventually have to tear the system apart to find equilibrium. You might wonder why I am telling you this. Not to paralyze you, but because you cannot adapt to a threat you refuse to see. An adaptation, real, radical adaptation, is still possible, but only if we abandon the fantasy of control and accept the physics. Because the nightmare of thermodynamics does not stop with trapped heat. It gets infinitely worse when you realize that the planet itself is physically changing color to absorb even more of it. What color is the Earth? You probably picture a bright blue marble hanging in the darkness of space. That famous photograph from Apollo 17. But that photograph is 50 years old. The Earth is getting darker, and the data proves it. In 2021, researchers at the Big Bear Solar Observatory published a remarkable analysis of Earthshine, the light reflected by the Earth that illuminates the dark side of the Moon. By meticulously measuring this lunar reflection over 2 decades, they discovered that the Earth is reflecting half a watt less light per square meter today than it was in the late 1990s. The planet is absorbing the light it used to reject. Why? Because the bright, white, reflective surfaces of the Earth are vanishing. The massive Arctic ice shields are melting into dark, sunlight-absorbing ocean water. The low-lying reflective clouds are dissipating due to the atmospheric ionization changes we discussed in the first act. The geometry of how our planet interacts with light has fundamentally broken down. Imagine you are walking through the Sahara Desert. You are wearing a crisp, white linen shirt. The sun is brutally hot, but the white fabric reflects the majority of the solar radiation, keeping your core temperature just barely survivable. Now, imagine someone suddenly strips off your white shirt and forces you into a thick, pitch-black winter coat. The sun has not changed. The desert has not changed. But your localized thermodynamic reality has just become unbearable. The black fabric absorbs every photon, converting it directly into searing heat against your skin. This is the Albedo Flip. The Earth has taken off its white shirt and put on a black coat in the middle of a cosmic desert. The incoming solar radiation has not spiked, but our planetary capacity to reject it has been structurally destroyed. The thermostat is broken, and the dark water is swallowing the light. But surely, you think, the remaining ice at the poles will keep the oceans cool for a few more centuries. This brings us to the most dangerous, misunderstood law of physics in the entire climate system. Here is where most people make a fatal mistake. They look at the graphs of the melting polar ice caps and feel a false sense of relief. A steady, downward sloping line. The ice has taken decades to melt this much, so it will take centuries to melt the rest. That is linear, intuitive human logic. And it is dead wrong, because ice does not obey linear math. It obeys the unforgiving, non-linear mathematics of phase transitions. And if you do not understand the physics of latent heat, you do not understand how fast this can go. In thermodynamics, the latent heat of fusion is the exact amount of energy required to change a substance from a solid to a liquid without changing its temperature. The math is staggering. To melt exactly 1 kilogram of ice at 0 degrees Celsius into liquid water at 0 degrees Celsius requires 334 kilojoules of energy. That is the exact same amount of energy required to take that 1 kilogram of liquid water and heat it from 0 degrees all the way to a scalding 80 degrees Celsius. Think about what that means. The ice caps are not just frozen water. They are massive planetary energy sponges. For decades, they have been absorbing the 240 terawatts of excess energy trapped by our broken atmosphere. They have been eating the thermal shock, hiding the true thermodynamic severity of our situation. Imagine you are sitting in a warm room, drinking a glass of whiskey with a large block of ice in it. The room is hot, but the liquid in your glass remains perfectly, consistently near freezing. The ice is absorbing all the ambient thermal energy to execute its phase transition. But watch what happens the absolute second that the very last sliver of ice disappears. The temperature of the liquid does not slowly creep up. Without the ice to act as a thermal buffer, the whiskey immediately and dramatically spikes to match the temperature of the hot room. The Earth is that glass. The Arctic and Antarctic ice sheets are the last slivers of ice keeping the oceans from absorbing the full, unfiltered brunt of the planetary energy imbalance. We are currently drinking the last drop of ice. Once the phase transition is complete, the oceans will not warm slowly. The energy that was being used to melt the ice will instantly be transferred into heating the dark water. The temperature graph will not be a slope, it will be a vertical wall. The oceans will mathematically boil, injecting unimaginable volumes of water vapor, the most potent greenhouse gas of all, directly into the swelling sky. The sky looks fixed. A static, unchanging dome. A transparent, permanent ceiling that has remained the exact same size and shape since the dawn of humanity. The thermal crisis simply means the air inside that invisible box is getting a little warmer, right? But basic physics dictates that gases do not behave like that under extreme thermodynamic stress. The sky is not a rigid container. It is a physical, compressible fluid volume resting on the surface of the Earth. And right now, because of the massive, unyielding influx of trapped kinetic energy we just discussed, the sky is physically swelling. The actual geometry of our planet's atmosphere is deforming. In 2021, a landmark study led by atmospheric scientist Benjamin Santer analysed 40 years of data from weather balloons and GPS satellites. They were tracking the tropopause, the exact boundary layer that separates the turbulent, weather-producing troposphere below from the calm stratosphere above. The results were visually striking. The tropopause is not staying still. It is rising, expanding outward into space at a rate of roughly 50 meters per decade, and the expansion is accelerating. The lower atmosphere is literally ballooning outward because the air molecules, supercharged with excess trapped heat, are moving faster and pushing harder against each other. This is thermal expansion on a planetary scale. Imagine you are heating a sealed, flexible container of gas over a Bunsen burner. As the temperature rises, the kinetic energy of the gas molecules spikes. They slam into the walls of the container with increasing violence, forcing the material to stretch and bulge outward. You are standing inside that bulging container. The Earth is changing its physical dimensions to accommodate the heat. It can no longer vent into the void. It is not just a line on a thermometer creeping upward. It is a structural, volumetric distortion of the sky itself. And as the troposphere expands, it disrupts the massive, high-altitude air currents, the jet streams that dictate the distribution of weather across the continents. The machinery of the sky is warping out of alignment. But what exactly is filling this newly expanded space? It is not just hot air. It is a highly potent, invisible fuel that is guaranteeing our destruction. Here is something that will change how you think about the entire climate debate. We are obsessed with carbon. Politicians and media have trained us to view CO2 as the sole villain. Stop emitting it, and the heating stops. We're the only ones holding the matches. Put them down, the fire goes out. But carbon dioxide is not even the main character in this story. The most potent, dominant greenhouse gas on the planet does not come from your car or your factory. It does not care about our industrial output, our solar panels, or our treaties. It is water vapor. And the laws of physics dictate that the Earth is about to pump unimaginable, staggering quantities of it into the swollen sky. There is a strict, unbreakable rule in thermodynamics known as the Clausius-Clapeyron equation. It is not a climate model. It is not a prediction. It is a fundamental law of physical chemistry. It states that for every 1 degree Celsius increase in temperature, the atmosphere physically holds 7% more water vapor. The math is relentless and exponential. As the oceans absorb the massive thermal shock of the failing albedo and the melting ice caps, their surface temperature spikes. Hotter water evaporates faster. This forces billions of tons of invisible water vapor into the expanding troposphere. But water vapor is a hyper-efficient greenhouse gas. It traps the infrared heat, trying to escape the Earth, far more effectively than CO2. Do you see the trap? The hotter the atmosphere gets, the more water evaporates. The more water evaporates, the more heat is trapped. The more heat is trapped, the hotter the atmosphere gets. This is a runaway, self-fueling positive feedback loop. It is a steam engine running completely on its own exhaust. Even if every human being vanished from the surface of the Earth tomorrow, the Clausius-Clapeyron equation would continue to boil the planet. You think you are fighting a localized fire that you can put out with a fire extinguisher, but you are locked inside a planetary steam room. The thermostat has been ripped off the wall, the heater is permanently wired to maximum, and the water is boiling on the rocks. The planet has transitioned into a self-amplifying thermodynamic state. And this extreme injection of kinetic energy and steam directly leads to the complete mathematical breakdown of predictability. When was the last time your weather app got the forecast right? We watch a Category 5 hurricane devastate a coastline that has never seen a hurricane before and chalk it up to bad luck. Meteorologists just need better satellites, faster supercomputers. The weather is still a rational machine. We just need better tools to read the dials. And if things get too bad, we can just move to a climate haven somewhere mild. But this thinking is completely oblivious to the terminal math of fluid dynamics. The atmosphere is a fluid, and the movement of any fluid is governed by the Navier-Stokes equations. In fluid dynamics, there are two states of flow, laminar and turbulent. Laminar flow is smooth, predictable, and stable. Turbulent flow is chaotic, destructive, and mathematically impossible to predict long-term. The transition from smooth to chaotic flow is triggered by one thing: the injection of excess kinetic energy. By trapping 240 terawatts of heat every second and injecting billions of tons of hyper-energized water vapor into the expanded troposphere, we have forced the Earth's atmosphere to cross the critical threshold into a chaotic attractor. This is the realm of chaos theory, first discovered by meteorologist Edward Lorenz. It means the system is so saturated with energy that microscopic changes in one variable cause immediate, massive, exponential shifts in another. Imagine a pot of water on a stove. Before it boils, the water is calm. You can predict exactly where a drop of food coloring will go if you place it in the center. But turn the heat to maximum and wait for the rolling boil. The water becomes a violent, churning mass of unpredictable kinetic energy. Try predicting the path of a bubble in a boiling pot. You cannot. Supercomputers cannot. The math fundamentally breaks down. You think you can escape the extreme weather by moving to a different state or a different country, but there are no safe corners in a boiling pot. The turbulence is systemic. The chaotic storms, the flash freezes, the heat domes, they will strike randomly and with devastating force, rendering agriculture and infrastructure impossible to maintain. The sky has become a hostile, unpredictable fluid. But the atmosphere cannot hold this infinite amount of chaotic energy forever. It has to dump the heat somewhere. And there is only one place on Earth big enough to absorb it: the deep ocean, the last buffer we have left. The ocean covers over 70% of the Earth's surface and plunges to depths of miles into the dark. It feels infinite. Surely the deep water will always absorb whatever we throw at it. But intuition does not override thermodynamics. The ocean is not infinite. It has a maximum carrying capacity for thermal energy, and the data proves that the buffer is completely exhausted. Where do you think the 240 terawatts of excess energy trapped by the failing atmosphere have been going? They have not been staying in the air. Over the past 50 years, the oceans have absorbed a staggering 90% of the planetary energy imbalance. The specific heat capacity of water is roughly 3,000 times greater than that of the atmosphere. This means the ocean can hide an immense amount of thermal energy without immediately showing it on a surface thermometer. But you cannot hide energy forever. According to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, and the World Meteorological Organization, the global ocean heat content, the total amount of kinetic energy stored in the water has shattered historical records every single year, consecutively since 2019. The graphs are no longer trending upward, they are going vertical. The deep water is saturating. Imagine a dry, massive sponge sitting on a kitchen counter. You start pouring boiling water onto it. For a long time, the sponge absorbs the water perfectly. The counter remains dry. You think the system is perfectly stable because you do not see the spill. But eventually the sponge hits its absolute physical saturation point. You pour one more drop, and suddenly, boiling water suddenly floods the counter. The Earth's oceans have reached that saturation point. They can no longer effortlessly absorb the trapped heat of the sky. Instead, they are beginning to rapidly radiate that heat back upward into the atmosphere, fueling the chaotic turbulence and marine heat waves that are currently devastating millions of sea creatures in their own habitats. The infinite sponge is full, and it is leaking boiling water. But the danger of a hot ocean is not just about temperature, it is about momentum. Because the ocean is not a stagnant pond, it is a massive, moving machine, and the engine driving that machine is about to stall. We think of ocean currents like the Gulf Stream as permanent features, as reliable as mountains. Warm water always flows north to warm Europe. Cold water always flows south. The conveyor belt is just how the planet works. But this conveyor belt, known to physicists as the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation, or AMOC, is not a permanent fixture of the Earth. It is a delicate, fragile, gravity-driven water pump, and it runs on a very specific, easily breakable chemical equation. The entire global circulation system is driven by thermohaline dynamics, a balance of temperature, thermo, and salt, haline. Warm, salty water from the equator travels north along the surface. As it reaches the freezing temperatures of the Arctic, the water cools down. Because cold, salty water is extremely dense and heavy, it physically sinks to the bottom of the ocean, creating a massive vacuum that pulls more warm water north behind it. This sinking motion in the North Atlantic is the literal heartbeat of the planet's climate. But you are currently pumping trillions of tons of fresh, zero-salt water directly into this mechanism. As the massive Greenland ice sheet melts from the trapped atmospheric heat, it is injecting a localized flood of fresh water into the exact zone where the ocean needs to sink. Fresh water is light. It does not sink. It sits on the surface, diluting the salt density and jamming the physical gears of the planetary pump. The ocean is too big to be stopped by melting ice, right? But in 2023, a groundbreaking peer-reviewed study by physicist Peter Ditlevson at the Niels Bohr Institute proved that the pump is mathematically dying. By analyzing sea surface temperatures and applying statistical models to the variance and autocorrelation of the currents, his team detected the unmistakable early warning signals of a complex system preparing to collapse. The AMOC is not just slowing down, it is actively destabilizing. Ditlevson's math predicts that the entire circulation system will cross the point of no return and shut down completely in a rapidly closing window between 2025 and 2095. The heart of the planet is experiencing severe, measurable arrhythmia. It is skipping beats. And when the planetary heart stops, the climate does not just get a little weirder, it segregates. The heat gets permanently trapped at the equator, superheating the tropics, while the northern hemisphere is plunged into a brutal, unforgiving freeze. But the true terror lies in how fast this will happen. There is a deep comfort in gradualism. Even if the current collapses, it will be slow, generational. We will notice, adapt, build seawalls, figure it out. That is linear thinking applied to a non-linear universe. Planetary decline is not a ramp you can walk back up. But the mathematics of complex systems do not operate on ramps. They operate on cliffs. In the physics of nonlinear dynamics, there is a concept known as a bifurcation point. It is a critical threshold where a tiny, seemingly insignificant quantitative change suddenly produces a massive, catastrophic, qualitative change. Imagine you are pushing a towering, heavy stone obelisk. You push it 1 degree, it leans, but it is stable. You push it 2 degrees, 3 degrees, 4 degrees. The system absorbs the stress, You intuitively assume that pushing it to 5 degrees will just make it lean a little more. But 5 degrees is the bifurcation point. The center of gravity crosses the base, and the tower does not lean further. It violently, instantly crashes to the ground. The AMOC is currently leaning at 4.9 degrees. When the thermohaline circulation hits its bifurcation point, the global climate will not slowly degrade over centuries. It will collapse into a radically different state in a matter of a few years. And here is the ultimate, inescapable trap of thermodynamics. But surely we can fix it. Invent a machine to suck carbon from the air, block the sun, cool the planet down, restart the current, push the tower back up. This ignores the law of hysteresis. Hysteresis dictates that the path a system takes to collapse is not the same path required to recover. To restore a nonlinear system, you do not just reverse the conditions. You have to apply exponentially more energy than was required to break it in the first place. You can easily apply a small amount of heat to a raw egg to boil it, but you cannot simply put the boiled egg in a freezer and expect it to turn back into a raw egg. The proteins have structurally reorganized. The system has permanently changed states. If the Atlantic current stops, the Earth's climate operating system will fundamentally reorganize. We do not possess the godlike energy required to unboil the ocean. The trap is mathematically designed to snap shut in one direction only. And history proves exactly how fast that trap closes. We want Earth history to be a slow story. The ice ages is a creeping frost over millennia. If the currents stop, we will have centuries to adapt, breed new crops, migrate south, transition peacefully. Climate change is a slow fade to grey, but the geological record locked in the ice does not show a slow fade. It shows a violent, instantaneous blackout. The Earth's climate does not walk down the stairs, it jumps out the window. To understand the staggering speed of this collapse, paleoclimatologists drill deep into the Greenland ice sheet to extract the GISP2 ice cores. These frozen cylinders contain a perfectly preserved, year-by-year chemical record of the Earth's ancient atmosphere. When scientists analyzed the data from a period known as the Younger Dryas, roughly 12,000 years ago, they discovered something that mathematically shattered the illusion of gradualism. During events known as Henrik events, massive armadas of ice broke off from the glaciers and flooded the North Atlantic with fresh water, exactly like the melting of Greenland is doing right now. This fresh water jammed the AMOC conveyor belt. The current stopped, and the global temperature did not slowly drift downward over centuries. It plummeted by up to 10 degrees Celsius in a single decade. Think about what a single decade means. It is not an abstract geological era. It is 10 years. You will watch your children grow up, and before they graduate high school, the fundamental climate of the Northern Hemisphere will have rapidly, permanently collapsed into a deep freeze. A 10-degree drop in 10 years means the absolute, instantaneous collapse of global agriculture. Wheat, corn, and soy cannot biologically adapt to a new temperature regime in 10 planting seasons. You think you are riding on a train that is slowly applying the brakes as it approaches a station. You are actually on a bullet train, and the universe has just pulled the emergency brake. You do not slowly decelerate. You fly straight through the windshield. The precedent is set. The trigger is identical. The ocean current is preparing to snap, and you will live to see the impact. Maybe the surface freezes. Maybe it boils. But surely the deep ocean survives. And at first glance, that is a fair bet. The deep ocean is the largest habitat on the planet. Cold, vast, ancient. Life down there has survived every mass extinction. Tube worms and bacteria thrive miles below the surface in total darkness. Surely the deep endures. It always has, right? But this relies on a false assumption that the ocean is a well-mixed, perfectly oxygenated pool of water. It is not. The ocean only breathes because the surface water physically mixes with the deep water, and the laws of thermodynamics are currently depriving the sea of oxygen. In 2019, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, released a harrowing special report on the ocean and cryosphere. The data confirmed a critical physical process known as ocean stratification. Because hot water is less dense than cold water, the massive amounts of thermal energy being absorbed by the ocean are causing the water column to physically separate into distinct, unmixable layers. The boiling superheated water sits permanently on top, acting like a thick, impenetrable lid of plastic wrap over a terrarium. Beneath this lid, the colder water is trapped in the dark. Without the vertical mixing driven by temperature gradients, oxygen from the atmosphere can no longer reach the ocean floor. The deep water is suffocating. It is transitioning into a state of hypoxia, and eventually, total anoxia. Imagine you are locked in a massive, deep bunker. You feel safe from the fire raging on the surface, but you suddenly realize the ventilation shafts have been sealed shut. You have whatever oxygen is left in the room, and when it is gone forever. That is what is happening to 80% of the Earth's marine habitats. The ocean is turning into a lifeless pool. As the oxygen levels drop to zero, complex life dies, and the void is filled by anaerobic bacteria that thrive in the dark. These bacteria do not produce oxygen. They produce hydrogen sulfide, a highly toxic gas that smells like rotting eggs. In the Earth's deep past, oceans that became anoxic and saturated with hydrogen sulfide burped this toxic gas into the atmosphere, contaminating the land and triggering mass extinctions. The ocean feels like an infinite blue sanctuary, but physics is actively turning it into a stratified, lifeless graveyard. The lungs of the planet are collapsing. If this feels overwhelming, good. It should. But remember, you are the first generation in human history that actually has the data to see this machine for what it is. Every generation before you was blind. They felt the symptoms, but never saw the blueprint. You are looking at the blueprint. That is not a curse, that is an advantage. Because you cannot adapt to a threat you do not understand. You take a step back and look at the board we have assembled over the last few hours. The heliospheric shield protecting our solar system is compressing and fracturing. The galactic cosmic rays are punching through the stratosphere, altering the chemistry of the clouds. The inner core of the Earth has stalled, ripping open a gaping hole in our magnetic field. The permafrost is melting, unleashing the methane clathrate reserves from the seafloor. The atmosphere has absorbed so much trapped kinetic energy that it is physically swelling into space, running on the runaway steam of its own water vapor. And the Atlantic Ocean current, the beating heart of the global climate, is mathematically grinding to a halt while the deep waters lose their oxygen. Faced with this overwhelming list of planetary failures, your brain tries to protect you with one final desperate illusion. You tell yourself that this is all just a cosmic coincidence. You assume that these are separate, isolated systems that just happen to be experiencing a bad streak of luck at the exact same time. You believe that humanity just rolled snake eyes on the galactic craps table. But in physics, there is no such thing as a coincidence on this scale. When the immune system, the respiratory system, the circulatory system, and the nervous system of an organism all fail simultaneously, doctors do not call it bad luck. They call it multi-organ failure. They recognize it as the final, coordinated shutdown of a dying machine. This synchronization is not an accident. It is a mathematical convergence. We are witnessing the second law of thermodynamics executing its ultimate mandate across every single layer of the Earth's architecture. The universe fundamentally hates low entropy. It hates complexity. And a planet with a stable magnetic field, a perfectly balanced ocean, and a thriving, highly complex biosphere is a glaring, massive anomaly of low entropy. For billions of years, the Earth has defied the chaotic norm of the void. But you cannot defy physics forever. The bill always comes due. All these systems are failing together right now because the mathematical anomaly of the Earth is finally collapsing back into the baseline chaos of the universe. So we need to ask one final, uncomfortable question. How much time do we actually have left? The answer is buried in the statistics, and the statistics are not on our side. Look around. Trees, animals, oceans, bustling cities. A living, breathing planet feels like the natural state of things. Biology as the default setting. Dead rocks like Mars or toxic pressure cookers like Venus are the anomalies. Planets that went wrong. But this perspective is mathematically inverted. In the grand thermodynamic casino of the universe, a dead rock is not the anomaly. A dead rock is the absolute overwhelming baseline. In statistics, there is a fundamental principle known as regression to the mean, first formalized by Sir Francis Galton. This mathematical law states that if a variable is extreme on its first measurement, it will inevitably tend to be closer to the average on its subsequent measurements. Now, apply this to cosmology. The average baseline state of matter in the universe is high entropy chaos. It is freezing vacuum, sterile dust, or burning plasma. For over 4 billion years, the Earth has maintained an insanely low entropy state. It has perfectly balanced the atmospheric pressure, the chemical composition of the oceans, and the magnetic shielding required to support fragile, water-based biology. This is not the norm. This is a statistical freak of nature. Imagine you were standing at a roulette table. You have bet on the green zero, and you have won 4 billion times in a row. Because you have never seen the wheel land on anything else, you naturally assume that winning is just how the game works. You think you are a skilled player. You think the casino was built for you. But you are not playing a game of skill. You are experiencing a profound statistical glitch. And the fundamental law of probability dictates that eventually, the wheel will spin, the ball will drop, and you will hit red. The house always wins. The synchronized collapse of the ocean currents, the stalling of the planetary core, the tearing of the magnetic field, and the swelling of the atmosphere are not a string of incredibly bad luck. It is the universe finally correcting a massive statistical error. The Earth is simply regressing to the mean. It is returning to the dead, silent, high entropy norm of the cosmos. The anomaly is over. But even if life is a statistical anomaly, Earth has maintained it for billions of years. Surely it can keep going for billions more. The planet survived the dinosaurs, the ice ages, asteroid impacts. It heals. It always heals. We have deep time on our side. Right? But this ignores the inescapable physics of stellar evolution. The Earth does not have an infinite lease. It has a hard mathematical expiration date, and the planetary cooling system is already failing. Our Sun is a main sequence star, fusing hydrogen into helium in its core. As this process of stellar nucleosynthesis continues, the core becomes denser and hotter. This is not a theory, it is a strict physical law. As a result, the Sun becomes roughly 10% more luminous every billion years. It is a slow, unstoppable blowtorch getting permanently brighter. To compensate for this ever-increasing solar heat, the Earth has relied on the carbon silicate cycle. This is a massive geological thermostat where the weathering of rocks chemically pulls CO2 out of the atmosphere, cooling the planet down to balance the hotter sun. But this thermostat has an absolute physical limit. Imagine you're in a sealed room with a heater that is slowly, permanently turning up its dial. For a long time, the room's automatic air conditioning works harder and harder to extract the heat and keep the temperature perfectly stable. You sit on the couch and think the system is perfectly balanced. But eventually the air conditioner hits its absolute maximum mechanical output, and the heater is still getting hotter. The Earth's thermostat has run out of numbers. To compensate for the brightening sun, the weathering process will soon have to pull so much CO2 out of the air that plant life will mathematically suffocate from carbon starvation. Without plants, the base of the food web vanishes. Shortly after, the escalating solar radiation will cause the oceans to physically boil into the atmosphere, triggering a runaway greenhouse effect that permanently strips the crust of all biology. The current thermal breakdown, the boiling oceans, and the trapping of heat are the early warning sirens that the air conditioner is finally failing. We are out of time. Science fiction tells a glorious story about our future. Humanity in its infancy. The ancient ancestors of a sprawling, multi-planetary civilization colonizing the Milky Way. Outliving the death of our star. Thousands of generations stretching into the deep future. A guaranteed mathematical certainty. We are at the very beginning. But the cold, hard statistics of probability dismantle this illusion completely. When you run the numbers, you discover that we are almost certainly not at the beginning of the human story. We are the final chapter. In 1983, the astrophysicist Brandon Carter proposed a concept known as the Carter argument. It relies on a strict application of Bayesian probability to the total human population. Think about the total number of human beings who have ever been born throughout all of history. Roughly 117 billion people. Now, if humanity is going to successfully navigate this global collapse, spread across the stars, and produce trillions of more humans in the deep future, then you, reading this right now, are in the extreme, microscopic fraction of the very first humans to ever exist. You would be a statistical anomaly of the highest order, standing at the absolute 0.0001% beginning of the timeline. Imagine a giant, opaque lottery box filled with sequentially numbered tickets representing every human who will ever live. You reach in blindly and draw a ticket. It says number 117 billion. Based on the fundamental rules of probability, is it more likely that the box contains 120 billion tickets in total, or 100 trillion tickets? The math dictates that you are almost certainly drawing from somewhere in the middle or the end of the distribution, not the extreme beginning. Therefore, the total number of humans who will ever live is likely very close to the number who have already lived. The Carter argument proves mathematically that we are standing at the absolute tail end of the human population distribution. The synchronized failure of our planetary systems, the stalling core, the collapsing magnetic field, the boiling oceans, the swelling sky, is not a hurdle for a young, plucky species to overcome. It is the closing mechanism of the cosmic trap. The math dictates we are late. The timeline is over. There is a pride in our history. We survived the ice ages. We navigated devastating pandemics. We miraculously avoided annihilation during the Cold War. We have stared down the brink so many times and pulled through every single time. Surely that means something. Surely we are a tough, adaptable species that is fundamentally good at surviving. We will adapt to the collapsing currents, the failing shield, the boiling sky. We always do. But this confidence is built on the most dangerous statistical delusion in the universe, the anthropic shadow. In probability theory and cosmology, the observation selection effect dictates that you can only observe a universe that was capable of producing you. Imagine you are standing on a stage, blindfolded, while 100 coins are tossed in the air. The odds of every single coin landing heads are astronomically low. The coins are tossed. You remove the blindfold, and every single coin has landed heads. You look at the result and come to a comforting conclusion. You assume you must be extraordinarily lucky, or that the universe favors you, or that the coins were rigged in your favor. But there is a much colder mathematical explanation. Imagine a multiverse where this coin toss happens 1 trillion times. In 99.9999% of those universes, you get a random, unremarkable mix of heads and tails. You cannot observe those universes because in those outcomes, nothing remarkable happened to observe. The only universe where you can stand on the stage and ask, why is this so perfect, is the exact microscopic statistical anomaly where every coin happened to land the same way by pure, blind chance. Your survival is not proof of your resilience. It is a prerequisite for your observation. When we look at the Cuban Missile Crisis or the solar flares that barely missed the Earth, we pat ourselves on the back. We think we are good at surviving. But the Anthropic shadow suggests that we are simply the version of humanity that hasn't been eliminated yet. The fact that we survived the past does not mean the probability of surviving the future is high. It just means the probability of the past was non-zero. We are walking along a crumbling cliff edge in the thick fog, thinking we are on a wide, safe highway simply because we have not fallen yet. But the synchronized collapse of the Earth's core, ocean, and atmosphere means the fog is lifting. We are staring down at the jagged rocks. Our survival up to this exact moment was an incredibly long, improbable winning streak at the cosmic roulette table. But the wheel is slowing down, the ball is dropping, and luck is not a mathematical strategy. So we look for an exit. Billionaire tech, CEOs promise bunkers. Science fiction promises Mars. If the Earth becomes uninhabitable, we will simply launch rockets and build domed cities on another world. Technology will outsmart thermodynamics. The Earth is just a starter home. When the roof caves in, we move to a high-tech synthetic apartment. But you cannot cheat the laws of physics by hiding inside a metal box built out of those exact same laws. A bunker or a Martian colony is a perfectly closed ecological system, and closed systems are mathematically destined to fail. We do not have to guess if a synthetic biosphere can work. We already ran the experiment. In 1991, a massive $200 million project called Biosphere 2 was launched in the Arizona desert. It was a spectacular airtight glass facility containing a miniature ocean, a rainforest, a desert, and agricultural land. 8 highly trained scientists were sealed inside, tasked with surviving for 2 years entirely on the life support systems generated by the enclosed ecosystem. It was an unmitigated, catastrophic failure. Within months, the mathematical balance of the carbon-oxygen cycle collapsed. The concrete used to build the facility secretly absorbed the oxygen from the air. The crops failed. The pollinators died out, and the facility was overrun by swarms of highly adaptable, crazy ants. The scientists began experiencing oxygen deprivation and severe psychological strain as the oxygen levels plummeted to dangerous, high-altitude extremes. External oxygen had to be secretly pumped in just to keep them alive. If 8 brilliant scientists with limitless funding could not mathematically balance a pristine, controlled terrarium sitting on a perfectly habitable planet, what makes you think a colony of humans can survive on Mars? Mars is a dead, irradiated rock. Its core is completely frozen, its magnetic field is utterly gone, and its atmosphere was stripped away by the solar wind billions of years ago. Mars is exactly the dead, high-entropy state that the Earth is currently regressing toward. Building a bunker on Earth or a dome on Mars is like trying to build a safe room out of cardboard inside a burning house. You are entirely dependent on synthetic mechanical systems to scrub your carbon, generate your oxygen, and shield you from galactic cosmic rays. When one pump fails, when one seal breaches, when the power grid shorts out from a solar flare, the closed system instantly reverts to chaos. You cannot replicate the geomechanical cybernetics of a 4 billion-year-old planet with steel and solar panels. There is no escape pod. The doors to the spaceship are welded shut, and the life support is failing. Step back and process the sheer scale. The core is stalled, the magnetic field is torn, the interstellar plasma is punching through, the oceans are stratified and boiling, the thermostat is broken. When faced with this, the human mind reaches for a story. The Earth is seeking revenge. Nature is angry at our greed. We are being morally punished for our sins against the environment. But this is the final illusion, and the most pathetic one. It is the ultimate manifestation of human arrogance. The universe does not care enough about us to punish us. Thermodynamics has no morality. The second law of thermodynamics does not feel anger, and it does not seek justice. It only seeks equilibrium. A highly complex, organized biosphere featuring liquid oceans, a protective magnetic dynamo, and billions of conscious mammals requires an astronomical amount of energy to maintain. In physics, A biosphere is known as a dissipative structure. It is a temporary pattern that forms in the flow of energy. But when the energetic stress on the system becomes too great, when the 240 terawatts of trapped heat and the galactic cosmic rays overwhelm the structure, the system does not get angry. It simply sheds the complexity it can no longer afford to maintain. The Earth is not punishing humanity. It is mathematically dropping a load. It is executing a hostile reset. The planet is shedding its complex, low-entropy biological layer to return to a simpler, more stable, high-entropy state. We are not the victims of a cosmic tragedy, and we are not the villains of an ecological morality play. We are simply excess entropy. We are the structural friction that the equations of the universe are actively trying to smooth out. Imagine you are sitting inside a microwave oven. The machine is turned off, and for billions of years, it has been a quiet, perfectly comfortable place to live. You built cities on the rotating glass plate. You fought wars over the crumbs, but the machine was never designed to be your permanent home. Now, the cosmic and planetary gears have shifted. The timer has clicked. The magnetron is humming. The microwaves are flooding the chamber, and the temperature is rising exponentially. The microwave does not hate you. It does not know you are there. It is simply performing its physical function. We are trapped in a machine that has just been turned on, and the silence of the void outside is watching us boil. So here is where the brain breaks. The core is stalling. The shield is tearing. The radiation is flooding in. The methane is erupting. The sky is swelling. The statistics say we are near the end. And something in the mind gives up. If the Earth is executing a hostile reset, if thermodynamics guarantees erasure, if our survival is just a statistical glitch, then nothing matters. Our lives, our struggles, our futures are meaningless against the crushing weight of the physics. Just sit inside the microwave and accept the countdown. But this is a fundamental miscalculation of value. It confuses the length of an experience with its worth. In philosophy, there is a concept known as optimistic nihilism, perfectly captured by the French philosopher Albert Camus in his essay on the myth of Sisyphus. Sisyphus was cursed by the gods to push a massive boulder up a steep hill, only to watch it roll back down to the bottom for all eternity. It is the ultimate metaphor for the human condition trapped inside the second law of thermodynamics. We build complex civilizations, we create art, we fight diseases, and the universe uses entropy to tear it all back down to dust. It seems like a torture. It seems like we should just let the rock crush us. But Camus concludes his essay with a radical, defiant realization. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. Why? Because the absolute moment Sisyphus realizes his task is completely absurd and decides to push the rock anyway, he becomes vastly superior to his fate. He's not pushing the boulder because he thinks he will eventually win. He knows the game is rigged. He pushes it as a pure, unfiltered act of cosmic rebellion. If the universe is a blind, mindless machine governed by chaotic equations, then it has no authority to dictate your purpose. The lack of inherent cosmic meaning is not a cage, it is a blank canvas. Scarcity is the exact mathematical property that creates value. If you lived forever on a perfectly stable, immortal planet, every single moment would be worthless because there would always be an infinite supply of tomorrow. But because you are a fragile, temporary anomaly living on the razor's edge of a planetary reset, every cup of coffee you drink, every conversation you have, every sunset you watch through the swelling atmosphere is a limited edition event that will never be replicated in the history of time. We are the band playing on the deck of the Titanic. We know the hull is breached. We know the freezing water is rising. We know the rescue ships are not coming. So what do? We do not scream. We do not surrender. We pick up our instruments and we play the best damn song we have ever played in our lives. By choosing to exist, to love, and to build in the face of inescapable entropy, you are spitting directly in the face of the void. Joy is the ultimate weapon against a universe that wants you to be cold and dead. But cosmic rebellion does not mean dying in ignorance. You cannot simply play your violin while the water rises and ignore the structural reality of the sinking ship. The philosophy of defiance requires extreme, unflinching clarity. Consider the political theatre. World leaders gather at climate summits, sign pieces of paper, debate carbon taxes, set emission goals for 2050. Plant enough trees, ban enough plastic, build enough solar panels, and we can put the planet back to the way it was in the 1990s. This is the ultimate, fatal arrogance. You're trying to treat a severed limb with the decorative band-aid. You cannot legislate the Navier-Stokes equations. You cannot tax the Galactic Cosmic Rays. You cannot pass a resolution to restart the rotation of the inner core or stitch the magnetic field back together. The hostile reset is not a political debate. It is a thermodynamic phase transition. And when a phase transition occurs, the old rules of survival are instantly erased. If we want to survive the bottleneck that is rapidly closing around us, we must radically shift our entire species' strategy from mitigation to extreme adaptation. The illusion of control must be sacrificed to the altar of physics. We must stop trying to blow out the forest fire with our own breath and start building fireproof structures. We need to accept that the coastal cities are mathematically doomed by thermal expansion and melting ice, and begin the largest, most highly coordinated inland migration in human history. We must accept that open-air agriculture will be decimated by chaotic atmospheric turbulence and ultraviolet radiation, and start moving our food production into hardened, closed-loop, vertical systems deeply shielded from the sky. We need to completely decentralize our power grids, hardening them against the inevitable geomagnetic storms that will slip through the gaping holes in the South Atlantic anomaly. We have to stop viewing the Earth as a gentle, forgiving mother, and start treating it like the hostile, alien environment it is rapidly becoming. The planet is shaking off the burden of low entropy. We must learn how to live in the high entropy storm. If you refuse to adapt to the math will simply remove you from the equation. We have reached the end of the descent. We have stripped away every comforting narrative, every political lie, and every psychological bias. We have looked at the naked, terrifying architecture of the planetary machine. We have seen the shield cracking under the weight of the Milky Way. We have heard the geodynamo grinding to a halt beneath our feet. We have watched the oceans lose their oxygen and the sky swell with boiling vapor. You now possess the info hazard. You understand that the anomalies happening around the globe are not random glitches. They are the synchronized, mathematical execution of a thermodynamic reset. You know that our long run of perfect luck is finally regressing to the mean. This knowledge places a crushing, almost unbearable weight upon your shoulders. But it is a weight you must carry. Because if you look at this entire horrifying sequence of events, the exact alignment of cosmic, geological, and biological catastrophes, you realize something profound about your own existence. The universe is a vast, dark, unthinking machine that operates entirely in the dark. A boiling ocean has no concept of pain. A collapsing magnetic field has no concept of fear. A dying star does not know it is dying. The universe is completely blind and deaf to its own destruction, except for you. You are the only mechanism by which the cosmos can actually observe its own thermodynamic decay. You are the anomaly that woke up. Out of the blind, swirling chaos of the Milky Way, a tiny collection of atoms temporarily arranged themselves into a highly complex, low-entropy structure capable of looking up at the sky and understanding the math that is about to destroy it. We are the universe's consciousness. We are the eyes of the machine. If we allow ourselves to be erased because we were too arrogant to adapt, or too paralyzed by fear to act, the universe does not just lose a species, it loses its ability to think. It goes permanently back to sleep. So when you look out your window tomorrow, do not look at the storms with naive confusion. Do not look at the changing sky with paralyzing dread. Look at it with the cold, clear eyes of an observer who finally understands the rules of the game. The illusion of safety is gone. The planetary reset has begun. The silence of the void is watching us. Do not blink.